So here's how I might respond to an email like that. It sounds like working with me is not in your budget right now. I totally understand. I hope you'll reach out in the future when your budget has changed. And in the meantime, here are some of my free resources that can help get you to that point. See? There's nothing about that that's shaming them or being defensive myself. It's just like, my price is my price. Doesn't seem like it's the one that will work for you. Sorry to hear that. Here you go. If you want to point them to something else, you can. That's optional. But I just like to reassure you that it doesn't have to be personal in any way. It isn't your job to decide if the price that you need to charge for yourself is appropriate for that person, right? That's that person's decision, and it's none of your business. Welcome to the Sunlight Podcast. In this show, we're talking about taxes, money, and careers for creative people who have a big vision for changing the world with their work. I'm your host, Hannah Cole, artist, tax pro, and the founder of Sunlight Tax. If you're an artist, designer, or creative entrepreneur who wants to grow your business sustainably, manage your taxes, and build a stash of fuck you money so you can control your own time and have a bigger impact with your work, you are in the right place. Hello. Welcome today. I'm so glad that you are here with me. I put out an episode recently, episode 20, where I talked about my own pricing journey inside of Sunlight Tax. I was really nervous about putting that out because pricing tends to really trigger people. I talk about money mindset, of course, a lot in my program and here on this podcast. And even so, I get nervous about it because I've seen people get really reactive around pricing and the sense of value that it can bring up in all of us. And that certainly includes me. But I was really pleased that I actually got some really lovely feedback from you listeners. And in particular, one listener, Kelly, if you're listening, wrote to me and said that that episode really helped her with a recent commission she had and sort of managed the client. And I think a lot of us have had this experience where we have a client who they have their own issues going on and they bring their stuff to us. And we, instead of recognizing sort of where their job is and where our job ends, we try to accommodate their issues by giving too much or going beyond the bounds of what is actually fair and reasonable for us. So for Kelly and for all of you, I wanted to bring you an episode today that is a follow-up to that pricing episode and talk to you about some pricing phrases and boundaries that have really helped me in my business. So let's get into that. I'm going to give you some specific wording that I actually use actively in Sunlight Tax or in past interactions. But first, I just want to give you a little bit of the backstory about why this came to be, how I learned how to do this. So first of all, I think the first place that I learned this stuff, I really rejected business and even economics and things like that as a younger person. I was not interested in the world of commerce because it seemed sort of corrupt to me. And to be totally honest with you, part of what I didn't like about the idea of business was when I was growing up, and I'm 43, so this is a while ago, it just seemed to me like when I looked at the quote business world, I saw a lot of people who didn't look like me. Mostly they were men, right? Even a certain kind of man. And I just never saw myself in that. And so what I tended to see was how people in that world operated. Of course, I'm not going to say I had a very realistic or a full scope impression of like the entire business world. And of course, there were people doing great things all along. But what I noticed and what I didn't like was a sort of like slimy sales tactics or a feeling of dishonesty or feeling of being out of alignment with one's values, right? I always valued authenticity and being myself and living according to my values. And I really just was not interested in entering any part of the world professionally that was going to put me out of alignment with who I am as a person or the values I hold dear. And that is really why I was attracted to the arts and wanted to be an artist. I mean, that, and I got a lot of encouragement about the way I drew when I was a little kid. I liked it. I was patient and slow and bad at sports. And so I got really encouraged in the arts, and then I excelled in them, and that became a beneficial cycle. So that was a bit of a tangent. But anyway, so I sort of rejected the business world. But the funny thing is the art world is still part of the business world, right? And then if you're sort of a freelancer or a self-employed person who is in kind of a creative part of the world or a non-traditional part of the world, you may have maybe a less extreme version of what the arts has to offer us, but you may still have a lot of shades of this. So even if you are, an acupuncturist, a designer, somebody who's sort of not an artist per se, but someone who is very mission-driven, values-driven in your work, it's really important to understand that when you're running a business of any kind, whether it's fine arts, performance, healing, or just making a product that makes people happy, but that feels in alignment with your values, it's really important to know kind of, one, that it is still a business, but two, that you can operate a business that is fully aligned, that feels really good to you, and that respects not just your customer, but respects you. And if you needed to hear this today, I just want to remind all of you, I told a friend this recently. A lot of us are really generous to other people, right? We give and give and give to other people. And then when it comes to ourselves, we don't give equally to ourselves. And I think one of the most important things for, life happiness, not just business happiness, is making sure you stay in balance and that you treat yourself as well as you treat others. So this is why I want to talk to you today about phrases you can use for pricing and boundaries, because boundaries, I have come to learn through personal experience, boundaries are how you express love to yourself. If you serve other people to such a degree where you don't take care of yourself, you aren't loving yourself, you aren't treating yourself well. And that is why this is actually important. And I think a lot of us grow up thinking that we can sacrifice ourselves. And a lot of us even are taught to do that. But as a woman in my 40s who has children and a business and clients and lots of demands, I'm just here to say that burnout is very, very real. And burnout comes fast and furious when you are over giving, when you are giving so much that you're not respecting your own needs. So the holidays, this episode is going to release around the holidays. And of course, it's the kind of time where you probably really need to hear this. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about boundaries, and let's talk about phrases you can use for pricing. My husband, when I met him, one of the things I learned from him that was really impressive to me was how to speak in professional language. So basically, I used to really take things personally. And I think that is one of the biggest problems with having good professional boundaries, is taking things personally. Because frankly, people need information, and people asking the question is not on its face a bad thing, because any buyer of anything, anywhere, whether it's an artwork, whether it is a performance, whether it is a logo, a design, a healing session, people need the information in order to make a buying decision. They need 3 basic pieces of information. How much is this going to cost me? What is it going to require of me? Oh, I'm going to say 4 pieces of information. What is it going to require of me? How long will it take? And what will I get? Right? There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, when you are the person in business, it is your obligation to provide that information about those 4 things to the buyer, right? That person cannot make a buying decision unless they have that information. And I think most of the problems in anybody's business come because the buyer doesn't feel clear enough on that information. It's when you make assumptions about timeline, scope, pricing, or what is required of both parties. That's when you start to have arguments. That's when we get hurt feelings. We get mad, we feel disappointed in how things have gone. When you are really clear and upfront about that information, then the buyer can make a proper decision, a fully informed decision. And that's really the ethical thing. Also, it's only your job to give them the information. I actually really don't believe it's your job to convince them that they should do it. I don't really like to operate that way personally. There are people who do, but I don't. Frankly, the buying decision remains with the buyer. It's never your job to say, you should do this, right? I think that's a little too aggressive. I don't like that. I personally think you should just give them the information, and then it's their job to make the decision whether that is worth it to them, right? And it is fully okay to negotiate a little bit to come to an agreement that you both feel happy with on different elements. Maybe to one buyer, the timeline is really critical. They need something fast, and they're willing to pay more money to get it faster. You can have that conversation. And if you're happy to set aside other projects because you're getting more money, then great. You can agree to a higher price and a shorter timeline. That's great. So you're allowed to negotiate any part of this, but both parties have to have the full information, right? Okay. So my husband, when I met him, he was then and still is a programmer. And he really taught me how to have professional conversations. The art world does not teach you this, right? The art world disguises work as fun. And so it actually becomes very easy, I think, when you're in the art world to mistake things that are business for personal stuff, right? To take things personally. And it's actually really important, I think, to recognize the arts as a business because it helps you just put it in perspective. Oh, are they going to buy a painting? Do they want to show my work in a gallery? Like, like to know what the motive is. It's really important, right? And to understand that nothing is personal. Really, truly, nothing is personal. So that's important. Also, anytime you start working with people, especially at a higher price point, a shorter timeline, or a more involved project, you're going to have disagreements or misunderstandings, and that's completely okay. The point is clarity and clear information is what both parties need. So we don't want to be sneaky and surprise people with information. That's where things start to feel unethical, right? You want to be really upfront. You want to be really clear. And the funny thing is, I feel like I have absorbed this message so thoroughly that I now get really annoyed and frustrated when I have artists approach me and they're not business-like enough, right? Like there are people who will approach me and they clearly want something, but they're kind of trying to make it sound like they want to be friends, they want to talk, they're interested. I'm like, that's great. I mean, those things are great, but I'm very busy. What's the ask? Like I actually really appreciate when people get to the point now because I just don't have a lot of extra time. And I'm not really thrilled to go like 5 emails deep with somebody when ultimately they're going to ask me something and I already knew it or smelled it from email 1. Just be direct. I appreciate that. So the art world can be very indirect. I really appreciate kind of taking lessons from other parts of the world, startup culture, which my husband works in, design culture, which, is much more client-based than the art world. And those two worlds specifically have just taught me a lot of what I know and what I use on a daily basis in Sunlight Tax, and actually in my art practice as well. Yeah, so my husband really helped me kind of phrase things. I would come to him with things that were going on in graduate school or applying to grants or dealing with various art world people. And I would come to him and I'd be all upset. And he'd be like, here, do you want the phrase for that? Let me just like give you a couple sentences that are going to help you make this less emotional. and he would give me sentences and they would really help. And I would be like, oh my gosh, that felt like something like I was all up in my feelings about this interaction. And then I like look at how this can be stated in a business-like and professional way. And it's totally great. And actually, the more I take the emotional part out of it, sometimes that requires like sitting on an email for a day. Once I take the emotion out of it, it's just about clarifying a misunderstanding, almost always. So that was really helpful. And shout out to my husband, because that stuff that he taught me about just like having difficult conversations in a frank and clear way has just helped me since the day I met him. All right. The other world where I got a lot of this education from was in the design world. So I took a job in 2011, 2012 in New York City as a project manager for a interactive design agency. If you don't know what interactive design is, it's like designing apps and websites and basically online stuff that you design that you interact with, essentially. It was so much fun. I love that world. And I worked with a very talented design team and the best boss, to this day, the best boss I ever had. I just loved that job. And one of the things I learned as a project manager's job is basically to communicate clearly to two parties all the time. You are basically the interpreter between the design team, the business team, and then the client, right? And so my job was basically to say, this is the scope of work. This is what we've agreed to do. This is the timeline on which we agreed to do it. And this is the amount of money for which we agreed to do this work. And basically, when you're a project manager, your job is to watch that like a hawk. And when the timeline is starting to slip, you need to communicate to both parties. When the budget is starting to slip, you have to communicate with both parties to get it back on budget. When the scope is starting to creep, which is a really big issue, scope creep, you have to come back to the client and renegotiate. Say, like, look, that wasn't in our original client contract. We're happy to do it, but that will cost X. And I'll work up a change order for you. That's the formal thing. Or you can have a less formal way of changing the scope. Essentially, if you let the scope of the project creep too much, you end up doing a lot of work for which you never get paid. Now, artists, performers, healers, you've experienced this, right? Who here who's listening right now has not experienced this phenomenon of scope creep, right? So it's really, really important. And the more you can be upfront in the beginning about exactly what the person buying from you is getting, what you're delivering, what you need from them in order to successfully deliver it. And that's really important. The timeline and the budget. When you can communicate and keep your eye on that and be super, super clear with the buyer, you will avoid misunderstandings that start to feel personal or upsetting. Okay. So being a project manager, it taught me all the stuff about how to manage this. And I just had to practice constantly. I wasn't good at it at first either, for the record. Like many things, the first time you do something, it's going to feel weird and you won't be good at it. And then you get better over time, right? Practice makes perfect. Okay, so I want to give you a couple phrases, and these should be useful to you, whether you're in a service industry, in design, or fine arts, performance. So I want you to take what I'm saying here, these phrases, and I want you to do the work of adjusting them to fit your world specifically. If you like this episode, if you have phrases of your own that you really love, feel free to send me a DM on Instagram at Sunlight Tax. I love knowing more of these phrases. I would be very happy to do a follow-up episode and talk more about additional phrases or how to restructure these to fit different worlds. So please reach out to me if you have that feedback. All right, here's what I've got for you. Some phrases that have really, really helped me that I hope you can take and use in your work to give your buyers the clear information that they need so that they can make their buying decisions successfully and you have fewer disagreements and misunderstandings. So here's one. I would love to talk to you. This sounds really interesting, but my calendar time is reserved for paying clients. Here's the link to book some time on it. Right. And so I actually use that phrase all the freaking time. There's a lot of people who will email me and ask for free tax advice. And I don't think people basically are being jerks when they do that. I think they, they're kind of seeing if they can get something, right? But the fact is, if I spent my time answering free tax advice questions that come into my inbox, I could spend 40 hours a week doing that. I could spend 100 hours a week doing that and literally not have time for a single one of my actual paying clients. So the tax world has actually made my life a little bit easier because it's so full and so busy, because demand is high. It's actually really helped me formulate my boundaries really well because I just don't have the capacity for all the things that I might wish to do. So I really do have to actually prioritize what I do in order to get that stuff done. So over time, I realized these little quick questions, it's always a quick question. These little quick questions could take up all my time. And I just have to say, I will do these for paying clients only. And there is no exception. So that's how I phrase that one. I'd love to talk to you. That sounds That sounds great. I reserve my time for paying clients. Here's the link to book one. In other words, you can become a paying client. Here you go, right? I'm not trying to say you're a jerk or stop trying to take advantage of me. I don't even assume that people are doing that, right? I'm just saying, hey, you know what? Like I'm just reminding someone who might not have thought about it. This takes time and effort and my professional training and actually incurs some liability on my part, which is why it's actually very important only to do this for paying clients, but you are welcome to become one. And here's how you do that, right? That's a really simple way of expressing that thought. Another issue that I come across in my work, so I do quite a lot of speaking. And in general, I find that organizations are very willing to pay my fee because it's really reasonable. For the amount and experience of speaking that I do, I mean, I give talks maybe 2-3 times a week. I'm very fluent with it and I'm able to tailor it to any audience. I mean, I feel a lot of confidence and frankly, love. I'm passionate about my speaking. So I have a price that I feel extremely happy with. It's very reasonable. And though I really care about serving a wide array of people, there is a period of the year where I have what I would say is peak demand, right? It makes sense. I'm teaching taxes. That tends to be January through April, right? So what I've learned over time is never to give discounts during peak demand times. If you want me in my peak season, you pay my peak price, right? And I actually have a little bit different pricing during peak season. And what that means, I talked about this in episode 20, there's a cost curve in economics. What this means is that people who value the talk coming at that time, they are going to pay a little bit of a premium. It's not that much really, but it's a little bit. They pay a little bit more money. And I know who's willing because it's the people who will pay that fee, right? If people have serious budget constraints, but they have a little more flexibility, I'm willing to talk to them anytime between May and October. And so if you have budget constraints, then I always say to people, I don't give discounts at all during my peak season, but if you need pricing flexibility, I'm really happy to talk to you. And I recommend you look at some dates outside of the key times, and we can talk about it after April 15th. So I actually often will not even have that conversation until my peak season is over. I really do try to push things that aren't time sensitive out of my peak time so that I have maximum availability for, like paying clients who have an urgent need to talk to me within that 4-month window when I am at my busiest, right? So I'm not saying I won't give you a discount, but I'm saying in this time period, I will not give you a discount. And you can be one of these high priority clients if you want to pay what a high priority client is going to pay. That's how I like to structure it. And that way I can have a lot of flexibility for organizations that have, missions that I feel really aligned with, et cetera. That's my discretion. I don't need to give discounts at all. And usually, to be totally honest with you, I'll tell you a little secret. When people come to me and ask for a discount and it comes from a real place of entitlement, this is rare, but it does happen where people just say, like, I'm a nonprofit, I should get a discount. I'm like, okay, but nonprofits have funding. I mean, the MoMA is a nonprofit. The Met is a nonprofit. Like, that doesn't mean like if you are serving, underserved kids in public schools and, if it's a mission that is like speaks to me in particular, I might bend my prices for you, but that is solely at my discretion and I don't advertise it. And when someone comes to me with the sort of, you should do this type of attitude, I usually feel like that's just not a client who is going to treat me well or really value and respect what it takes for me to deliver this work. So I don't have a good response when I get that sort of like entitlement feeling from a client. I tend to, of course, I'm very kind. I don't like to burn bridges ever, but I don't usually respond to that kind of inquiry, or I respond with a much less flexible answer. Alternatively, when people come to me and they're like, I love what you do. I really value, I value your expertise. I value your time. If I could, do X, Y, and Z to make it really convenient and easy for you, would you consider a discount, for example? That's the kind of approach where I often will be like, absolutely, let's talk. So the approach means a lot to me. Okay. that was a little more than you maybe wanted on that. But anyway, the takeaway for you there is that you might have peak times or places where you don't want to be flexible, and then places where you can be flexible, right? So I think that's worth examining in your practice, in your business. What can I flex on and what can I not flex on, right? For me, I can't create more days in the tax season, and so I don't flex on that stuff. Days where life is more chill in the summer, in the early fall, I can flex more. I can take more time. I'm much more willing to do exploratory phone calls at that time of year. You want to do an exploratory phone call? It is not happening on March 15th. So another one is about scope creep. Number 3, I want to talk to you about like what you can say with somebody when you have an agreement in place. You've said, this is what I'll deliver. This is the timeline. This is what I need from you. And this is what you'll get, right? The basic elements of your job, clarifying for people. So when people come and propose to you like, oh, I'd also like, these additional PDFs designed or on top of my logo and branding and, pitch deck or whatever it is you're designing for someone, I'd also really love like Instagram templates and, XYZ. So here's how you can come back with them with scope creep responses. So I will say to someone, that's a wonderful idea. And I agree about you needing it, or maybe you don't agree. And then you would say that work is outside of the scope of our original agreement. So I'll be happy to do that work. I'm going to need to sign a new agreement to price out the additional work. So basically what you're doing there is you just want to state very clearly and explicitly what you're suggesting. There doesn't need to be any judgment attached to this. It can be like, that's a great idea. I love it. That's not in our original agreement. In order to include that, the additional price will be X. You can even go so far as to say, I will write up a change order or an additional contract to cover X if you're working that way. If it's less formal, you can do it just with an email and just say, I'm so happy to do that. That additional work will cost this additional amount and the timeline will adjust in this way. Do you agree to that? And you get their consent and then you go forward. See, both parties come to an agreement on this. It's a 2-party interaction. Okay, next. What about when people come to you and they tell you that your prices are too high? That's a real dreaded one. Doesn't that for a lot of you kind of put a little pit in your stomach? You have to understand that your pricing will never be appropriate for everyone. That's just not a thing, right? I could price my work at $1 for whatever it is, my program. And someone out there would tell me that it was too pricey. I mean, that's just how pricing is, right? Someone will be left out. So to me, what's important to think about is like, well, what will support and sustain me? What will allow me to show up to this work full strength, full force, so I can deliver it well? Because ultimately, if you underprice and if you overwork yourself or you force yourself to work on a timeline that doesn't allow you any rest, you're going to end up resenting your clients. I have gotten to that place myself because of underpricing, and it does not feel good. And your clients will not thank you. So sustainability for yourself is so important. It's really important to understand that it's okay for people to say they don't want to pay the price that you're charging. That's their decision. It's actually really none of your business, okay? Your job is just to present what the price is and what they get for that price, right? So if somebody comes to you, they might tend to make it personal, and that might trigger you even a little bit more. I want you to try to talk to yourself with compassion and say, my prices are where they need to be. My price just does not line up with this person's budget right now. So here's how I might respond to an email like that. It sounds like working with me is not in your budget right now. I totally understand. I hope you'll reach out in the future when your budget has changed. And in the meantime, here are some of my free resources that can help get you to that point. See? There's nothing about that that's shaming them or being defensive myself. It's just like, my price is my price. Doesn't seem like it's the one that will work for you. Sorry to hear that. Here you go. If you want to point them to something else, you can. That's optional. But I just like to reassure you that it doesn't have to be personal in any way. It isn't your job to decide if the price that you need to charge for yourself is appropriate for that person, right? That's that person's decision, and it's none of your business. Okay. When people make requests of your time, right? So this happens to artists quite a bit, but I would venture to say this happens to a lot of people, where people will request a sit down to you. They'll want to go over something with you. Again, for me, because I get so busy during my peak season, I have to really be careful how I manage my time. This has become an important part of me just managing my workflow, my income, all of those things. So here's a way that I like to deal with requests for my time, which is another way you can eat up your capacity to earn your income. You can say, that sounds wonderful, whatever it is you're proposing, but my time is budgeted for this week already. I hope it goes well for you. That's it. Notice how I don't really explain 10 different reasons why I can't do a thing, because that's getting on the defensive. And I don't really need to do that, right? I don't owe that person anything. I just get to say the answer, which in this case is no. A coach that I really love, Rachel Rogers, she has this phrase, no is a complete sentence. So I want you to think about that. I do tend to want to put some warmth and kindness on things, especially when I'm saying no, but that's up to you. Okay. Another thing that you can do is how to respond to people when they ask for discounts. First of all, I just want you to understand, let's have a little reset here. A lot of us, no matter what field you're in, get asked for discounts from time to time. You can react however you want to react to that, right? You can get offended. You can get all up in your feelings. You can feel disrespected, or you can just recognize that person is being a little cheeky with you, right? You've said your price and they're coming and saying, oh, but how about not for me, right? So it's a little cheeky when somebody asks for a discount. And, maybe they're coming from the attitude of, well, I might as well try. And maybe they're coming from an attitude of, there's no way I could work with her without it. You don't know the answer to that. But I just want to say, if you put your prices out there and somebody comes back to you and asks for a discount, they're a little bit saying I don't believe you, or I don't want to do it. And I think, to me, I don't really love that as a premise for asking the question. So I'm not super into that ask just up front. But a lot of us need a way to deal with it. So let me talk about one potential way that you can deal with when people ask for discounts. Here's an example of a way that I might answer that question. I don't give discounts on this kind of work. So for me, often what that is one-on-one sessions. I never, ever, ever discount my one-on-one work. Why? Because I can't discount how many minutes are in an hour, right? My time is my time, and that is the least flexible thing that I have. So I never discount one-on-one work. Anything that requires my one-on-one time, you're just not going to get a discount on it. But I do have some things where it's easier for me to discount, right? And so sometimes if I want to give a discount, and I'm under no obligation generally, but if I want to, I might discount a thing that sort of costs less for me to discount. A program, something pre-recorded, something that I have offered in the past as a bonus in my programs, right? So I might do that. You don't have to, but you can. Here's a way that you could do this if you were, for example, a painter, right? You're being asked for a discount on your painting. You could say, I don't give discounts on my latest artwork. If you'd like a discount, I can show you some older work or some prints or multiples. So that would be a way to answer, if you're in the art world, my sort of high value stuff, I never discount, right? My latest stuff, the stuff that's going to go into the upcoming solo show, no discount. If you want older work, if you want multiples, if you want works on paper, we can talk about discounts there, right? That's a good way to deal with it in, for example, the art world. Decide what of your work needs to stay top value, top dollar, and what of your work is sort of less skin off your nose, okay? So hopefully that has helped you. I really hope that some of those phrases have helped you kind of change your attitude potentially, or sort of given you some phrases that you can just use directly yourself in your own practice for saving yourself some time and headache and stress. And I just want you to remember that people are always going through their own stuff. And of course you are too. And everybody needs a little forgiveness and a little bit of grace. And I never assume that people are being jerks when they write to me. I mean, I need grace too, because I am not a perfect being. And I have definitely shot off emails a little too quickly without being quite as thoughtful as I should have been, and then regretted it instantly. I like to assume that people are good and that people are thoughtful. And unless they're giving me evidence to the absolute contrary, then I assume that they have good intentions always. And I write to them in good faith in that way, just from the position of, I'm going to clarify the information that you need to make a good decision. All right. So I hope that's helped you. I want you to remember that the more neutrally you can approach this kind of work, the better for everyone. Try not to take it personally, and try not to assume that the other person is a dick face. Try to assume that they're maybe busy and maybe that they have a child whining at their knee as they send you an email, and things come into their email that might have absolutely nothing to do with you. Your job is to clarify. Their job is to make the decision, and they need the information from you to make a proper decision. When they feel very clear on the information of what it looks like to work with you, scope, deliverables, timeline, what is required of them, when they have that information, you can both proceed without misunderstandings, with full clarity. And that's where you have one of those magical, wonderful working situations where each party feels that they are getting their full value. That's what you want. That's when business is working really well. So if that was helpful to you, if that kind of like mindset reframing has been helpful, then you might be interested in watching my masterclass. If you missed my live launch in November, I did put the recording up of that masterclass, and we talk about a lot of mindset stuff around money, as well as common mistakes that people who are self-employed make with their money. And I also talk about a framework that I use inside of my program, Money Bootcamp, to get people set up with your money, your bookkeeping, your taxes, and your retirement. So you are welcome to sign up and watch that class in your own time. You can go to the link go.sunlighttax.com/register. And I just want to give you a little sense of me modeling what I'm trying to show you here today. In that class, I teach you some valuable lessons about mistakes that people make. I teach you a framework to get you started handling your money. And I'm going to be very clear. I'm going to give you that scope of information that you need about my program. And listen, that's only going to be interesting to you if you are someone who's thinking about it, who's considering it. And if you are, then you will get to see how much I charge, what the price is, what you get, what the timeline is, and what is required of you, right? That's me modeling, giving you the full information that you might need to make a purchase decision and make a decision. Is this valuable enough to me to spend that money, right? That's the whole game right there. So there's no sneak attack. I just feel like it's my job to clarify for you what you get in my program. And so if you're interested in watching that masterclass that you may have missed in November, it is up right now at go.sunlighttax.com/register. You can learn some important lessons, get some more of this mindset medicine, and help get your money on track. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have more phrases for scoping your work, saying no to discounts, etc., send me a DM on Instagram at Sunlight Tax. I would love to hear from you. And if you have a friend who's having trouble setting boundaries, share this episode. They might need it. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. See you. Bye. Thank you for listening. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review. It really helps, and share it with a friend. I'm so grateful. This podcast is for education and entertainment only. Nothing in this episode should be taken as individual tax or financial advice. You can find all the tools, books, and links we reference at sunlighttax.com/podcast.